My cousin stole $12,000 from our grandma and somehow convinced everyone it was me. For 3 years, my entire family treated me like a thief until I finally dragged the truth into the light, right there in court. Never in a million years did I think my own blood would betray me over money, especially money that belonged to the one person who loved us both, without conditions. But grief changes people, or maybe it just exposes who they really are underneath all the smiles. And my family? What it revealed wasn't pretty. Before all this happened, we looked like your typical close family, or at least that's what we told anyone who asked. Christmas dinners at Aunt Linda's place, 4th of July cookouts in Uncle Mike's backyard, yearly trips to Lake Geneva that were supposed to be family bonding. From the outside, we could have passed for one of those wholesome Hallmark families, complete with matching sweaters and forced laughter. But if you looked closer, you'd see the cracks running right through us. You'd notice the way Aunt Linda constantly turned everything into a competition between her son Brandon and me. "Look how sharp Brandon dresses," she'd say. "Maybe you should take notes." Or, "Brandon earned another scholarship. What are you doing with your life?" She ran every family event like a tipsy queen with a cheap crown and an endless glass of Chardonnay, while my mom and her sisters smiled like hostages, too scared to start a war, too proud to walk away. They'd plaster on polite smiles while Aunt Linda threw her little jabs, pretending not to hear the insults bleeding through every compliment. And then there was Grandma Ruth. She was the heart of our family, the only one who seemed immune to all the drama. Grandma had this rare gift for making Sunday dinners feel sacred, like no matter how chaotic life got, everything slowed down around her table. She made you feel like you mattered, even when everyone else made you feel invisible. After my dad walked out when I was 12, Grandma stepped in like a quiet storm of strength. She showed up at every school play, helped me pick out secondhand suits for job interviews, slipped me a few bills whenever she knew Mom was too proud to ask for help. She never missed a birthday, never forgot a milestone, and when her health started declining, I was the one who took time off work to take care of her. Brandon? He didn't show up at the hospital until her 3rd week of chemo. Claimed he was too busy with internships. But guess who walked away with the largest piece of her inheritance? Let me back up a little. Grandma passed away in March of 2020. It wasn't unexpected. We'd been preparing for it since the end of 2019, but that didn't soften the blow. COVID lockdowns had just begun, so her funeral was small. Masks, elbow bumps instead of hugs. I gave the eulogy and barely managed to hold myself together. Brandon arrived late, hiding behind designer sunglasses and flashing a Rolex. He gave me one of those half-hearted bro hugs I didn't return, acting like we were still the same kids who used to share bunk beds at Grandma's lake house. But the second she was buried, something shifted. I could feel it. Then the whispers started. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Linda. "You need to return the money, Logan." At first, I thought it was a joke. "What money?" She sighed in that perfectly practiced tone of fake disappointment. "Don't play dumb. We know you accessed Grandma's estate account. The trustee said $12,000 are missing, and the records point to you." I actually laughed, out loud, because it was so absurd it had to be a prank. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "I don't think it's funny," she snapped. "This is felony theft, Logan. You stole from your grandmother's legacy. You should be ashamed." For a moment, I couldn't even speak. My brain just froze. It felt like watching a horror movie through someone else's eyes, like this couldn't possibly be happening to me. "I didn't touch her money," I finally said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Then how do you explain the wire transfer?" She shot back. "What wire transfer?" She hung up before answering. An hour later, my phone blew. Texts from cousins, aunts, even my own mother. "Why would you do this to Grandma? You need to give the money back before we press charges. Don't bother showing up for Thanksgiving." I called everyone back. Nobody answered. I even went to my mom's apartment, and she wouldn't open the door. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own family," she said through. "Just go." And just like that, I was the outcast. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to defend me, to say, "This doesn't sound like Logan. He took care of Grandma. He was there." But that moment never came. Brandon stayed silent the whole time. No texts, no calls, nothing. Somehow, nobody thought that was suspicious. So I did what any sane, falsely accused person would do. I started digging. I asked the estate lawyer for financial record, reviewed every transaction, and traced the $12 trail like life depended. I found it. The lawyer mailed me a packet, the final disbursement and the wire transfer law. I doubt he expected me to actually go through them, but I did. I had to. I was desperate. There it was. A $12,000 transfer made 4 days after Grandma, authorized by a forged digital signature, not mine, from an IP address that, when I traced it using a friend's tech tool, led to an apartment in Evanston. Not my address, but Brandon's. I remember staring at that screen for what felt like forever. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear for them in months. I dug back through my old messages and found that awkward selfie Brandon had proudly sent the whole family from his new Evanston place. I matched the date on that photo to the wire transfer. It landed 2 days after he moved in, so he cleared out the money after he'd settled into his new condo, using Grandma's name and the estate login to authorize the transaction. Here's the ugly part. Brandon had a finance degree. He'd interned at a private wealth firm downtown, so he knew exactly how these estate disbursements worked. He understood how to make a dirty move look clean on paper. He assumed nobody would notice, and when someone finally did, he pointed the finger at me. At first, I wanted to drive straight to his place, throw the evidence at him, and watch his smug face crumble. I wanted to rip that fake Rolex from his wrist and shove every one of Aunt Linda's mean little comments back down her throat, but I didn't. I realized they were hungry for a villain, and Brandon gave them one on a silver platter. They didn't need to know whether it was true. They just wanted someone to hate. Fine, let them have their monster for a while. Let them relish being right. Instead of exploding, I shut up. I went silent. I ignored calls and texts, and stopped arguing to anyone who wanted me to beg for mercy. I moved into a cheaper apartment, picked up 2-day shifts in retail, and drove for rideshare at night. I skipped Thanksgiving and Christmas that year. No forced smiles, no Aunt Linda's fake concern, no stares across the table. Every free minute I had, I spent building my case. I created spreadsheets, printed IP logs, highlighted suspicious authorizations, and saved screenshots of Brandon's social posts, the ones where he gushed about his luxury condo and his fancy, consulting, work-from-home hustle. Receipts don't lie. I wasn't just trying to clear my name. I planned to make sure he couldn't get away with it. It took almost 8 months to assemble it. I found a legal aid clinic downtown and met a young, hungry lawyer who'd just passed the bar and had a shot at a... When I handed him my files, he looked like I'd handed him the plot of a crime drama. "Logan, this is straight-up theft. Fraud," he said. "You can do more than win. You can bury him." So, I filed a civil suit for fraudulent misrepresentation and financial damage. I didn't tell Mom or anyone else, not Aunt Linda, not my siblings. The subpoena landed at Brandon's condo like a missile on a Thursday morning in early June. 3 hours later, Aunt Linda called, nearly hysterical. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. I was at work, so I stepped into the break room and said calmly, "Filing a lawsuit." "What does that look like? You're tearing the family apart." Brandon did. "I'm only holding a flashlight," she hung. Classic move. Of course, Brandon hired a flashy lawyer with an expensive suit and a big talk. They tried to spin this as a misunderstanding. Maybe Grandma meant to give him money. Maybe she mentioned it verbally. I had paper. The forged digital signature, the IP timestamps, the social media purchase he made the day after the funds hit his account. Didn't take long. Less than 4 court sessions, the truth started to unwind. Watching Brandon on the stand, all that cocky confidence drained away. He looked like a scared kid for the first time. It felt, I won't lie, pretty vindicating. The judge ruled for me. Brandon had to repay the $12,000 plus interest and legal fees. The court labeled it intentional fraud with malice. That judgment would follow him for the rest of his life, and once the court record existed, other family stories started to surface. Turns out he'd borrowed relatives before, funds that never seemed to return. The whispers grew louder, facts rearranged themselves into a pattern, and Aunt Linda's image took a serious hit. She tried to stage, but nobody. Mom eventually called. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "I should have believed you." I didn't accept her apology out loud. Sorry doesn't rebuild burned bridges, especially bridges you watched someone else set on fire. People like Aunt Linda act like consequences don't apply to them. Even after the ruling, even after Brandon's public humiliation and the judge clearing my name, she kept acting like I'd caused the problem. "We shouldn't have aired family business in court," she told my mom. "Logan should have come to us first." "Come to you? After you iced me out and labeled me a thief? After you turned the whole family against me?" Right. She never wanted to reconcile. She wanted control. Now that her golden boy's halo had cracked, she needed a new target to manipulate. Only there was one problem. I wasn't the same kid I'd been 3 years earlier. Those 3 years hardened me in ways I didn't expect. I worked double shifts, lived paycheck to paycheck, and rebuilt whatever was left of my self-worth from the ground up. I spent birthdays alone, ate microwave dinners on Christmas Eve, and watched life carry on without me, while everyone I loved thought I'd robbed a dying woman. You don't live through that and come out soft. So when Mom mentioned that Linda thought it was time to move past it for the sake of family, I gave her a short, clear answer. No. She called me that evening. "Logan, sweetie, I just think..." "Don't sweetie me," I cut in. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have wanted peace." That made me laugh, an ugly kind of laugh. If Grandma were still alive, she'd have smacked Linda with her oxygen tank and handed me a slice of pie while doing it, I said. Pretty sure she'd have also wanted people to stop stealing her money. "What do you want, Linda?" That's when her voice broke. She said Brandon hadn't paid a cent yet. He'd lost his job after the ruling, and his name was now poison in Chicago's finance world. Turns out nobody wants to hire a guy with a fraud judgment hanging over his head. Who could have guessed? Worse, she'd co-signed everything for him. His lease, his car, even his private student loans. In other words, she was screwed. And her grand solution? She wanted me to forgive the debt. To make a statement saying the whole thing had been a misunderstanding. To let Brandon off the hook so he could rebuild his life. I almost dropped my phone from laughing. You want me, the guy you exiled, trashed, and framed, to clean up after the son who ruined my life? You're not being fair, she snapped. No, Linda, I said evenly. I'm being accurate. There's a difference. She started crying. Real tears. Or maybe just louder ones this time. I couldn't tell. I didn't care. All I could think about was that night I ate instant noodles alone in my basement apartment, while they passed around turkey and wine, talking about how disappointed they were in me. Let her cry. She finally hung up after saying, "You'll regret this." But the only thing I regretted was not cutting them off sooner. The next few months were a slow-motion collapse. Brandon defaulted on his repayment plan. His wages were garnished. He broke his lease and crawled back to Linda's house, where she was draining her retirement savings to clean up his mess. Eventually, she had to sell the house. Meanwhile, I was finally catching my breath. I'd gotten a promotion, health insurance, and even started dating someone new. Someone who didn't care about my past, just about who I was now. She didn't know every detail, but she knew enough, and she believed me. I also reconnected with my younger sister Maya, the only one who reached out after the court ruling. She told me she always had a feeling I wasn't lying. We met for coffee, talked for hours, laughed like we used to before everything fell apart. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Then one night, I came home to find a folded sheet of notebook paper on my doorstep. No envelope, just messy handwriting I hadn't seen since we were kids. It was from Brandon. "I know you'll never believe me," it started, "but I'm sorry. I panicked. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just needed the money. When Mom found out, she said you'd be the easiest to pin it on. I never thought it would blow up like this. I'm so sorry." I read it 3 times. Then I lit it on fire in the kitchen sink and watched the ashes spiral down the drain, because sometimes closure doesn't mean forgiveness. It just means knowing the truth and choosing peace anyway. I thought that was the end. After everything, the court, the humiliation, the years of silence, I really believed that part of my life was closed. Then Maya called. Linda had cancer, stage 3, aggressive, ovarian. Maya said she'd been checking in on Linda now and then, because that's who she is. Too kind for her own good. She told me Linda wasn't doing well, that the treatments were brutal. Brandon was supposedly taking care of her, but mostly hid in the basement playing games and dodging bills. "She's not the same," Maya said softly one morning over coffee. "She talks about Grandma a lot. Says she regrets everything that happened." I didn't say a word. I just stirred my Americano and watched the cream swirl. A week later, Maya texted again. "Linda's asking if you'll visit. Just once. She wants to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone face down and turning off notifications, because honestly, I didn't know what I owed her anymore. Closure? Forgiveness? One last goodbye? Or nothing at all? 3 months passed. Then she was gone. The funeral was quiet. Closed casket. Brandon gave the eulogy. I didn't go. Maya did, though. She told me afterward it was painfully awkward. Half the family didn't show up, and the ones who did looked like ghosts. Brandon apparently cried, but no one really bought it. A week after the funeral, Linda's attorney called me out of the blue. He said she'd left me something in her will. I almost didn't go, but curiosity has a way of dragging you into rooms you swore you'd never enter again. I met the lawyer in a cramped downtown office, a quiet man in his 60s, with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers. He handed me a sealed envelope and told me, "She wrote this herself. We didn't open it." I took it home and sat with it for an hour before I finally broke the seal. The note inside was short and handwritten, neater than Brandon's messy apology. "Logan, if you're reading this, I'm gone," it began. "I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that I finally saw everything. What I allowed, what I You were never the villain." She admitted I'd been the scapegoat chosen because she couldn't face that her son was capable of cruelty. The confession cut deeper than any courtroom. Then she wrote what felt like a benediction. She hoped I'd build a life so bright no one could ever feel small again. She said Grandma had always been proud of me, that she'd told Linda so when I wasn't around, and Linda. At the bottom of the page, she included something she said she should have given me years ago. Tucked inside the folded letter was Grandma's gold locket, the one she wore every Sunday, engraved with all her. On one side was a tiny photo of me as a boy, on the other, a picture of Grandma and me together I'd never seen. I stared at that photo, didn't cry. I just let the silence sit on me like a wet coat. That night, I went to visit Grandma's grave, first time in years. It was a cold, gray March evening, wind cutting through my coat. I brought the locket and a single yellow daffodil, her favorite. Standing there, I finally said aloud everything I'd never been allowed to say, how much I'd needed her voice, how many nights I'd wished someone would simply... I made it, Grandma, I told her quietly. Not because of them. Despite them. I laid the locket on the headstone for a moment, then slid it into my pocket and walked away. That was a year ago. Now I own my own financial consulting firm, built from scratch with a couple of friends who believed in me when almost nobody else did. We help nonprofits and small businesses, the people the big firms tend to screw over. Brandon? Last I heard, he moved out of state and ended up in a customer service job in Florida. He filed for bankruptcy 6 months after Linda died. The fraud judgment still sits on his record. He still carries his version of the story and blames everyone else. I don't care. I have peace. I don't want revenge. I don't want apologies, and I don't need anyone to admit they were wrong. My name is cleared, and I've got my dignity back. I finally get it. Family isn't just blood or a last name. Family is who shows up when your life burns and sits down with you in the ashes. If you've been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you, you're not alone. You will get back up, even if you have to start from the ground up.